Blake made only 8 illustrations for Paradiso, as opposed to 72 for Inferno and 20 for Purgatorio, though he would probably have said that he was more concerned with man's fall into division and the work of redemption than in the uneventful state of bliss. Looking at these magnificent images, one is rather sorry he felt that way. The first of these, a spiral stairway to heaven, is a general impression of the celestial ascent rather than an illustration of the Jacob's ladder Dante places in Cantos 21 and 22 in the sphere of Saturn in the heaven of the mystics. The spiral here suggests all the circular paths Dante trod, down the circles of hell, round and round the slopes of Mount Purgatory, and now among the celestial spheres. At bottom we have the curving horizon of the earth where Paradiso's journey begins. The sharp arcs moving like waves along its surface indicate the sphere of fire which comes between Earth's atmosphere and the heaven of the moon. The successive ovals of each ascending loop echo the outline of the rounded ground level, suggesting that every level of ascent seems to those on it to be the complete and real world. The human figures on the first level, for all that they are scribbled more than sketched, are effectively evocative of fellowship, paternal care, the backward glance of those who hesitate before an existential change, rapture, solitary determination, and even the squiggles at upper right are meaningful, for these suggest how all these beings will transform into flaming angels and finally stars whose circlings define the path. Dante describes all the heavenly souls as spheres of living light, as fires, lamps, and stars. Blake is the only illustrator to have addressed their transformation, and he has used it to make the landscape live. In this sketch, not numbered for any canto, Blake has made a map of Dante's physical cosmos, with Earth at bottom, surrounded by the planetary spheres, of which he has distinguished that of Mars, as Dante did, by giving the planet a crusader's cross and equipping it with helmeted angels, though these ended up looking a little unwell. This is where Blake lost all patience with Dante's traditional cosmography. The higher we go, the more moronic the angelic intelligences become, culminating in a goofy god waving hello from heaven's height. Blake believed that the power of prophecy was none other than poetic inspiration, albeit of a particularly high grade. He thought of Christ as the essence and embodiment of this creative mental power. Dante's vision of Christ, placed in the sphere of Mars, the heaven of those who fought for the faith, represents the spirit of the Crusaders. Blake makes it the triumph of the imagination. Dante kneels in awe, enfolded in smoke that bursts into transformative flame. He is literally ablaze with inspiration. Looking up at Christ, we see that he is rendered in ever cooler colors to underline that these fires do not hurt or harm, but purify the senses and produce a clear serenity. The triangle which Christ's body and radiance suggest, and the spheres that outline his hands and feet, are emblematic of a perfection that includes the physical. Blake has pointedly given halos to Jesus' extremities and only faintly suggested an orbicular brightness about his head. The spiritual validation of the physical is unobtrusive but undeniable. This is no bloodless, intellectualized communion. The poet sees in the material world the body of Christ. In Canto 19, in the sphere of Jupiter, we are in the heaven of just rulers. For this, Blake has not illustrated anything in the poem. He had no sympathy for Dante's political visions. Instead, he comments on the whole concept of divine justice. The patriarchal angel seated here recalls Blake's many depictions of the sanctimonious God of this world, Jehovah of the moral law, a cruel caricature of Jewish belief, which was one of Blake's few disappointing conformities with mainstream Christian tradition. Here Jehovah has been redeemed up to a point. Though not vouchsafed insight or bliss, the Old Testament God has at least been rendered innocuous and looks demurely heavenwards for inspiration. He holds a feathered pen in suspense above an unwritten scroll, rather than engraving laws on tables of stone with an eye to those below him. The three illustrations beginning here form a suite, which follows cantos 24 through 26 in broad outline. Beatrice declares the poet is worthy of redemption, and the two begin a courtship dance against a background of souls who wheel in intersecting spirals. Still in Canto 24, St. Peter appears in the poem. He questions Dante regarding faith. Peter manifests like a red comet, holding before him the key that opens heaven's gate. Blake follows Dante in representing souls as animate flames, but he is unique in showing us the personality that inhabits the blaze, an expedient that occurred to no other illustrator. Now Peter is joined by James, whose body of light is blue. The meaning of these apostolic figures is the simple, obvious one given in the poem. Peter stands for faith, his passionate certainty evinced by his confident gesture of blessing and his warm, ruddy light. James exemplifies hope, and his fire is cool in contrast, while his less tense expression and open hand are meant to make him seem expectant, though he ends up looking a bit worried. But if the avatar of hope were entirely self-assured, there would be no distinguishing his expression from that of faith. Dante and Beatrice aerial ballet now overlaps in sign of their increasing intimacy. Here Blake develops Dante's thought precisely. Beatrice in the poem is explicitly identified with wisdom, and her dance with Dante shows the poet's experience and his understanding in ever more beautiful agreement as he encounters faith and hope. St. John, the representative of love, joins them. His yellow flame-like orb shows him literally on fire with this most appealing of the theological virtues. His body hurtles acrobatically into view, for love is impulsive, and he embraces himself, for he must mime his essential nature while remaining discreet from the other figures. Looking up at this new sun of love, Dante mirrors Beatrice. They precisely reflect one another, which shows the inner unity of heart and mind even more effectively than the physical merging in the preceding illustration. Interpreting Blake is sometimes made more difficult by the habit one develops of unraveling his complex and profound ideas. One can be flummoxed by a thought as simple and obvious as the one here. This scene, like the canto it illustrates, is inspired by the famous line from 1 Corinthians, "And so faith, hope, and love abide, and the greatest of these is love." With regard to this picture, Eric Pyle provides an insight which is too good not to repeat. All the earlier illustrators struggled to represent the light on light of Dante's heaven. Botticelli's unfinished sketches succeed accidentally. Had he colored in all the space he left blank, the little fireballs he meant for souls would have read like lit, insistent matchheads. Di Paolo's illuminated 15th century Sienese manuscript, with its excessive ultramarine and gold leaf, achieves a certain barbaric splendor. His images are, if not the most radiant, inarguably the shiniest. But Blake's thin washes of watercolor make the underlying white paper read as light, and on the backlit computer screen, Blake's images turn into delicate stained glass. In Canto 30, Dante is vouchsafed a vision of the entire host of heaven, the angels and the saved. First, he sees it as a river of light pouring down from heaven, a river whose banks grow flowers that are souls nourished by angels who visit them like bees. Beatrice instructs Dante to drink with his eyes from the river of light to strengthen himself for more terrific visions, an action which Blake makes graphic. Just before this scene, Dante says that there comes a moment when every poet finds himself defeated by the greatness of some theme. So it is for him now. At every new level of spiritual attainment, Dante becomes more sensible of Beatrice's beauty. It is now ineffably great. At upper left, we have a poet, copiously belaureled, pausing over his scroll to look heavenwards for inspiration. Clearly, Blake thought Dante's coy excuses were a bit silly, and repeats the one cited with wicked literalness. There are a few figures we can't really identify, a pilgrim perhaps at upper right, and some mysterious figures at lower left. But we can, if we look closely, make out angels descending, like divers, in the waterfall of light. In Canto 31, Dante has his penultimate vision. Heaven's host as a great mystical rose, the throne and embodiment of Mary. She is here exalted above all created beings, subordinate only to the Trinity itself. Blake accepts this description as far as staging is concerned, but his content is far other. On heaven's heights, the strictures of mistaken morality have ceased. On both sides we have shut books. The one at right is labeled Bible Chained Down. That on left, probably meant for the volumes of secular law, is simply labeled Corded Shut. The faceless angels who seem imprisoned with their scriptures are labeled, left and right, thrones and dominions. Though these are traditional names for categories of angels like seraphim and cherubim, they were obviously chosen for their authoritarian connotations. Here all opposites are reconciled. So declare the sun and the moon sharing a single sky. There are two open books. That at left is labeled Homer, that at right, Aristotle. Now, Blake loudly deprecated both of these authors as representing poetry and wisdom of a materialist sort, unimproved by divine inspiration or finer feeling. Here, even they are among the saved, since in Blake's heaven, all the natural instincts are redeemed. The sports proper to heaven are warfare and hunting, but, Blake adds, these activities are carried out with broad-winged arrows of thought that inflict only wounds of love. Here the physical is reconciled with the spiritual, and the pillowy vegetable cushions of the giant rose are closer in spirit to Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights than to one of El Greco's strenuous heavens. The pillowy petals and sprawling ample ladies make it a kind of sublime pajama party. In his view of woman, Blake was at times closer to Chaucer than he was to the Romantics. He agreed wholeheartedly with the wife of Bath that women desiren to have sovereignty. Enith Arman, Blake's mythical exemplar of femininity, though she represents spiritual beauty, is, in her fallen state, vain and tyrannical. Enith Arman is there in Mary, who holds a scepter and a looking-glass, clearly labeled. Blake meant this to be an apotheosis of femininity, like Goethe's vision at the end of Faust, where Mary is the eternal feminine principle that draws us ever upwards. In Blake's beatific vision, Mary is redeemed. She doesn't use her attributes to preen and bully. She happily holds them up like gifts at a baby shower.